Microphone equilibrium, microphone equilibrium. Ulfner raised his closed fist in silence, signifying to the following group that it was time to take a break. They had been walking for some time now, not only on this day, but many cycles previous. The Deliverer had been kind to shed wisdom upon their path, for which they offered up tribute in a standing totem each night. Ulfner was an observant leader, and though he questioned whether or not the Deliverer could appreciate their offering, he saw how it affected the spirits of his men, the ritual allowing them to take note and recognize the success that they had as a group, in a way shedding more light upon their journey. If not anything, it served as a reminder of the path they had taken up to this point, for which he believed the tradition had started, but was forgotten as the land was painted with life to give it more color. He thought it not bad, because it indefinitely stirred his men up unto remembrance, to participate in such events. He had these thoughts upon rest, but didn't share them, questioning even himself. Maybe it was all alive. Once the men had caught their breath, his men spoke of how much further they had to go. The rhyme they recited, spoken and applied to where they found themselves now, giving clues as to where they were and where they need go. The rhyme had been passed down for generations, and was the extent purpose for their journey now, a history and prophecy for their people, where they now went to, where their people were from. There was once 3 brothers in the ancient fertile land, and upon the death of their father, a pact was made that none would inherit the land, as to prevent war. For their father had spoken that if they stand together, forever will they stand, but if they fall apart, so will their people. The stories tell of a land and of a people more than they are now. With most things taken care of, they were able to look off in the night, telling stories of those who were making their mark by fighting against nothing, bringing us something to see. They also told of things to be, and now was the time spoken of back then, told in the sky. So they traveled to save themselves from the horrors foretold. The 3 brothers went off in their separate ways, taking with them the closest to each of them, with no one to tend the land they left. Each brother took with them a stone piece, a portion of a whole split into 3 equal shares, and split among the brothers. They knew that their father wouldn't have wanted to see them split, but they took it as wisdom to split and keep peace, rather than to stay and to war. The time was then in which was told. Today's time would signify the reunification of the stone between each of the 3, which he carried now, and had been passed down an untold number of times from chieftain to successor. As the days waned, they followed the rhyme, and on one of the nights, in his contemplation, he swore that amongst the firelight he could make out a totem, something beyond his time, now old and worn, but he took this as the merging from his dreams to come, and the light of the day fading fast. Soon he would see many things, so he dismissed this as one of them. They had so far been able to trace the land through song, and they grew ever more eager as each time they sang it, the landscape around them appeared near the end. It was drastically different than from where they had came, and they had to take off their furs and cut their clothes to keep from becoming too hot. Where they came from had its moments of being green, but this green was different, not as dark. With the green, parts of the trees bearing different shapes, and creatures they were wary of, exposing them to the great gift for longer than they usually did, making sure to rid the creatures of demons before they ate them. He wondered how his partner was faring back home. He had left his son in charge of the tribe, but knew that he would be listening to his mother in private. He laughed at who was really in charge, stumbling at that moment as he tripped on an odd stone, not falling itself with the lay of the land, seemingly out of place. He looked below and saw a multitude scattered across the earth. They looked placed and aligned, and were stretching together for a ways off in the distance, to where then he couldn't see. He wondered if this was a road. The song spoke of it, but he didn't know what it was. But this fit. He wondered why people would make such a thing. It was easy enough to walk without one. In fact, it had an odd sensation on his soles that he quite disliked. The men were tense, as was he, but he needed to show that he was relaxed. If something did happen, they need to be calm and collect, so they could react appropriately, and rather than run, attack. Being in a foreign land, unless your foe is also foreign, they already know the layout, so rather than run into a trap, better to stand your ground now. As the chances increased, they would find enemies. As settlements of man became apparent, his thoughts focused on such, and for good reason, because on the horizon, he saw a man. Ulfner hadn't expected them to be as different to him as they were, standing before him, but was sure it was he who he was supposed to meet. Seeing a stone that had matched his, they had once been the same people, but had now changed as much as the land had during their journey across many skies. They spoke, and the better part of the time was spent figuring out how to speak to one another. Stories of where they came from were the first to be told. Ulfner had relayed how where he came from, another was that was like man but wasn't, bigger, hairier, didn't talk. It wasn't spotted frequently, but when it was alone, and would sometimes take their women, for which children were born. It wasn't frequent, but he thought it would be a story beyond theirs. There were other wild people, but most of them were just deserters of the tribe, losing their ways and becoming ridden with demons. He was wrong about his stories being the greatest. The other groups relayed stories of battles with great armored beasts, for which they wore necklaces showing their teeth and claws, a sign of becoming a man. Dragons they were called, and they were frightful, some large on land, in which a bite would kill you days later, and some that were at home in water, making waters very dangerous. They had a name for the creatures of the wood, in which he spoke of previously, Sasquatch, but he thought dragons sounded more fierce. Perhaps it was because he hadn't grown up with them. Maybe they thought his tales were as amazing to them as theirs was to him.